It is now 12:30, and we'll begin today's session. I will now turn it over to our session moderator, Caleb Berkemeyer.
Thanks, Maynard. Welcome everyone to today's webinar on new approaches and resources for embracing accessibility in the whole organization. This is a webinar brought to you by the Mid-Atlantic ADA Center, a project of TransCen, Inc. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Chris Law is the president and owner of Accessibility Track Consulting. His goal is to help lead developments in the field of organization-wide approaches to accessibility. Chris is the manager, lead author, and community of practice chair for the National Federation of the Blind's Accessibility Switchboard project, which aims to provide starting point resources for diverse audiences on how to incorporate accessibility across an organization's activities. He is also the chair of the annual ICT Accessibility Testing Symposium, an event bringing peer-reviewed conference presentations to the East Coast. So I am pleased to introduce Chris, and I will turn it over to him.
Thank you very much. Hi everyone, this is Chris. I'm going to advance to the next slide. I think it's number 11. So here we start with I'm going to start right in with a slide that has 4 quadrants, and in it is just some text labels: employees, customers, human resources, and technology. And what we find in real life is that it's easy to focus on 1 or 2 of these things in an organization, and it's quite possible and easy to overlook other aspects. So, for example, we've had companies that have had marketing campaigns that have touted their employment of disabilities, and they make a big investment in marketing to show what a great job they're doing. And then as soon as somebody who's blind contacts their customer support, the customer support people are untrained in how blind people use the web. We have organizations that sponsor disability organizations like human resources disability organizations, and then if you actually go look at their websites, you find that their websites feature all manner of technical problems with accessibility. I've had a lot of personal experiences with this lately with hotel booking systems, where the companies are full on their human resources side, but their technical side is a little bit lacking. And then you might have, say, a human resources campaign in a company where they are trying to focus on training and hiring of people with disabilities. And maybe on the technology side, they have, say, that they've made their customer-facing website accessible, but they haven't given any regard to, say, the phone system that the employees use, or the intranet, you know, the employee-facing web, as it were, the time and attendance system, even, or even the security to get through the door at the beginning of each day, if you can't use those systems if you're blind. Or have some sort of physical disability that precludes you using their preferred system. So we see periodically, we see these studies being published where government websites in particular are picked on, where the researchers say, look, we've had a long time to work out the technology sides of accessibility of websites. How are government departments doing? And you can easily Google for recent studies, but they come out every 6 months or so from different sectors around the world, and they always find that the people are coming up short. If you went to a list of all the organizations that, say, sponsor the human resource side of disability access, and then you actually did that same sort of study on the technology behind those websites of those companies, you might end up with about the same results. And so in the accessibility field, we've always been asking why. We've always been asking what is it that we can do to change the situation. typically everything every new technology that comes as a new introduction to the marketplace is not accessible on day one. So ATMs were like this all through the 90s. Vending machines are still, that are in the employee lunchrooms. Those are mostly inaccessible. The other day I was walking through an airport, and many of you may have encountered these same things. There's this huge explosion of tablet systems in place of wait staff in restaurants, in airports. And I can pretty much bet you that those systems are not accessible right out of the box. So as a field, the accessibility field, we've always been looking for answers to why this sort of thing happens and what can we do to change it. And now what we're really trying to focus on is the people that are involved in the businesses. What can we do to help those people who are asking their questions of what they can do to get started? So next slide is number 12. In the early days of the federal government, what typically used to happen was that you started up an accessibility team as a result of legislation like Section 508. And what I have here is a slide with a typical organizational chart with all the different departments that you might have. And one item is circled, which is the accessibility team. So you've got the security team, the usability team, and then there's the accessibility team, and they're circled, and there's somebody with making a presentation saying, let's focus our changes here. And so when you start up with the idea of, well, let's tackle accessibility, typically you start by creating a team, and that team does its work, and they have really little influence over the rest of the organization. They're focused on their own setups. And the next slide is number 13. Here I've got the same chart, and the person instead saying, let's focus on the whole organization. So I've got arrows across the entire organization, not just the accessibility team. And this is a change that's really happened over the last 5 years, 6 years. The people in the accessibility field have been thinking about this and saying, wait a second, it's not just the accessibility team, it's not just the website, it's not just the HR, it's procurement, it's IT support, it's marketing, it's customer service. And if you really want to have an organization where accessibility is embraced across the organization, your focus has to be across the organization. So it kind of sounds obvious now that you should be doing this. But again, if we think back to 5 to 10 years ago, people were focused squarely on the technology side, or they're focused squarely, if they're in the HR side, they're focused on the HR issues. So they're thinking HR is training of staff, but they don't have a regard necessarily, or they're not forward thinking to say, well, what is the technology implications of this? Because they don't have that background. Okay. So the next slide is 14. So any time that you start introducing a concept like organizational change, you're going to find a lot of people will tell you that it can't or it won't happen. So you may be in these situations yourself where you're really thinking about it and you're having these discussions about change with your peers, and they say, well, it's a great idea, but it's not my responsibility. I'm not accountable for this, that type of thing. So this sort of fear of change happens, but research tells us that people actually don't fear change. What they really fear is ambiguity. So I have a diagram here from a book called Process Consulting by Alan Weiss, and it has it starts with the current state, and it's very easy for people to describe their current state and do an analysis, do some sort of measurements of where are we on things across the board in our organization. And it's very easy as well to get people to agree that the situation should be better. It's very easy to agree on a desired state and have people draw up plans and say, this is where we're going to get to in 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. What is difficult is actually then doing the work. And it's going through what Alan Weiss calls the ambiguous zone. And so these are represented by squiggly lines that are a bit chaotic, going from the current state to the desired state. The reason we've had these sorts of problems is if you think of, say, somebody who's in the HR department thinking of their current state or their desired state, they're looking at it as a as a human resources issue. And if you have somebody who works in customer service and they look at their current state and their desired state, they're looking at it within that bubble. And rarely, if ever, does somebody come along and say, wait a minute, it's actually the whole organization. So how do you nudge people towards that? So typically, we can think of the people that are faced with this situation of, I want to make some sort of change, and I really think that this should be organization-wide. What is it that I should do? In addition to your past experience, with the experience you've had in your own schooling, and the experience you've had with the company so far that you work for and the companies you have worked for in the past, the first thing you might do if you're new to this area is you might just Google for the answers. And so it really depends on how good you are at Googling, and it depends on how good the information is out there as to whether you find the right answers or not. You might find a book. Again, if you're good at searching for the right book, how do you know what's the right book? You look on Amazon for, like, how do I change my organization regarding disability? You might find some references that are 15, 20 years old, and you might find a few that are more recent than that. But it's kind of a bit of luck involved. You might ask a colleague. You might do it's in a sort of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, fashion. You might phone a friend, and it depends on whether they actually know the answers. You might ask the world. You might ask the audience. You send out social media things, looking for help, looking for participation. Or you might ask a superior. You might ask a consultant. But which one do you go and talk to? And if you talk to 3 different consultants, you get 3 different answers. What do you do? So it's really hard for newcomers to figure out what it is that they should be doing. And we found that people go down rabbit holes, they go down dead ends, or they rely on sort of blind luck to find something. And so what we did with this project of the Switchboard was to think of ourselves as like, well, what can we do to help those people who are trying to figure out the answers? So I've got a representation here on slide 15. The slide shows a small number of accessibility consultants and other subject matter experts, and then a representation of business and industry of all different sizes, represented by lots and lots of different circles of all different sizes. And some of the consultants are in dialogue with some of the industries, but they're certainly not involved with all of them. There's far too many companies out there for the number of accessibility consultants that exist. And then I've also highlighted one red circle, which is a representation of a small business. That small business may not be able to actually afford a consultant. So in this scenario, maybe they've just gotten a demand letter that's been sent to them because their restaurant's website is inaccessible, and they just don't know what to do. And they think of calling up a consultant. The first consultant they call, they say, well, that's actually way out of my price range. So the difficulty for people is to try to figure out, well, how do we get that information from all the accessibility experts and put it out in a way that would help a larger number of people, specifically on this issue of how do you change your organization. Okay. So on to the next slide, number 16. So this is precisely what we did with the Switchboard. What I have here, modified the previous slide. I've got the accessibility subject matter experts. We formed them into a community of practice. We currently have 30 of them. We just have some thumbnail images of organizations that are, half of them are accessibility consultants and half are other subject matter experts like universities and nonprofits and that sort of thing. And the idea of the Accessibility Switchboard is to take that knowledge from all of those consultants and subject matter experts of how do you make the first steps and form it into guidance and articles that can help the newcomers. When we first started this project, a lot of the people that I talked to when we were forming the community practice said, well, I've got a lot of proprietary information that I don't necessarily want to share. And I said, we're not really trying to share that proprietary information. We're just trying to share the basics on how people get started, because our problem as a field is one of scale. There's far too many companies out there who are not doing accessibility. And we need some other way in other than to just hope that one day they will call you with a question about how to make their organization accessible. So what we've done is try to take the information from experts and put it in a format that's usable in a wider field. And yes, this does follow the same model as many other similar attempts. It has the same sorts of challenges of keeping it going and keeping the information up to date. So this is seen very much as an ongoing project. Right now we've created a lot of content, and now we're in the process of disseminating that content to people. Okay. Moving on to the next slide. So let me just give you a quick introduction to what the Accessibility Switchboard is. I can't give you a full overview in the time we have today, but certainly go look at the website afterwards, and at the end of the session here we have the links to all the websites. So the Accessibility Switchboard's homepage it's a little bit stretched out on this graphic, but the main focus when you arrive on the home page is the selection tool, which we call the sort of selection gizmo, where on the left-hand side we're using a switchboard motif. First identify what area you're in. You're in business and industry, or you're a consumer, or you're in higher education, or you're in government. And then on the right-hand side, you select, do I need guidance, or am I looking for resources, I'm looking for support, and I'm looking for answers. A lot of times, guidance and resources and support could mean the same thing. So we end up with, for whatever individual is coming into this, so we do have multiple ways to find and access the information that's there. So when you connect those two, so we've connected, as an example, educational institutions and guidance, and we get a list of guides that have been created specifically for that group. Okay, and then so if I click on the first one, which is we're now on to slide 18. This is just one example of many. So a guide, starting an organizational-wide accessibility program, a guide for higher education institutions. So each guide has a similar structure, and it has a very short introduction and background. They're all about 8 to 10 pages long, so quite short. Some would say long, but we kept it short. Each has a multi-step process. So, for example, in this guide for starting a program, we say, look, step one is you need to systematically appraise your current situation. Then you need to, step two, consider your alternatives for technology compliance and organizational culture. That being said, there's the way you have things now that's maybe not working, and the way that you could have things set up in the future. There's lots of different options. Then gained executive support. Now, this is again a new thing in the last 5 years. that people in the accessibility field are in universal agreement right now. Nothing changes in organizations without getting the executive support. You can be the accessibility evangelist all you like, and you can run around and talk to as many people as you like, but unless the executives give you their support and give you their backing, nothing's going to change in your organization. You have to have that. And then step 4, establish your stakeholders and goals. Step 5, design and plan and implement your new system. And step 6, periodic updates. Each of the guides includes links to other Switchboard articles. So we can't cover everything in one 8-page guide. You can't go into details on procurement, for example. You can't go into details on testing or usability and things like this. So we link to other Switchboard guides that are relevant, and we link to published resources. One published resource. So if somebody's Googling for a resource on organizational change, they might find 10 different resources, or actually 20,000 resources. We get the community of practice to agree on one and point people to one and say, go read this. This is the best thing. And then we also have links to published case studies. So we've tried to balance the length of the articles with the need of newcomers who are looking for a quick answer, but we figure you can't give them the answer on just one page. 8 to 10 pages to really introduce them to the topics and get them thinking. And so all of the guides that are in here, and if I go into the next page, again, this shows you why we can't cover this all in one quick webinar. Right now we have 13 guides and 15 articles, what we call Q&A articles and other resource links. So there's a lot of thumbnail pictures here of the different guides here. And it will still grow in the future. So this is the result of lots of research, lots of practice, the expertise of a large community of practice, and a lot of collaboration went into creating this content. Okay, so that's the Switchboard. Again, take a look at the Switchboard in your own time, and please provide us with feedback. And do share the information as well. All the information on the Switchboard is completely free. All of it is Creative Commons, as it were. So you can take that content and reuse as much as you want. The next slide is slide number 20. So in business, this is what I ended up deciding to do. So right now, what I do as a company, my company is called Accessibility Track, I am now taking the expertise of consultants and other subject matter experts and putting it in a form to help people in business and industry and government figure out how to get started. So I'll mention 2 projects that I've worked on. This is slide 21. The first being, as mentioned in the introduction, the Accessibility Testing Symposium. And in the Accessibility Testing Symposium, we're now in our 3rd year. It's in the fall, and it has taken place in the DC area, although next year it's going further afield to other states, and it'll jump around other states. But if we look back at our list of our subject matter experts and consultancies, a lot of those consultancies create test processes. And up to 3 years ago, there was no forum for everybody to get together and discuss those things. So this is the target audience for this symposium is experts who create test tools and test processes. It's not so much the end users of test processes, although there are some of them, but it's really focused on getting those subject matter experts together. So those that are involved in creation and use of test processes, as well as people that manage test teams and implement test teams across their organizations. We end up creating a sort of proceedings. Everything is peer reviewed. There's no exhibitors at this event. It's not a sales pitch. It's not product demos. It is really discussion of the scientific issues to then further the accessibility testing field as much as we can. I have a thumbnail of some of the text from the website. Again, we'll put the link on the last page, and a few images from last year's event. At the bottom image is Paul Schrader at our Lunch with the Keynote event last year. On to the next slide, slide 22. This is the last thing I'll talk about. This is actually brand new. Again, the idea of getting the best minds together and creating something new. So I'm sure most of you who are tuned in today, you will know that web accessibility lawsuits are on the rise. There has been an explosion of them over the last 3 or 4 years. It all started with a lawsuit against Target around about 8 years ago, and now there are thousands and thousands of lawsuits being brought. Up to this point, we didn't really have a forum for discussion for this, so we created a forum. And so I have a thumbnail image here of the speakers at the summit. We have 20 speakers. We have an East and a West summit that's coming up. The East one is on October 1st and 2nd in Washington, D.C., and then there will be a West event in March in Anaheim. And the goal is to bring together both the plaintiffs and the defendants, experts in their fields on the plaintiff and the defendant side, as well as the accessibility experts and people that are helping organizations make their change and helping the legal teams in their analyses, for example, of measuring the accessibility of a website and that type of thing. So this, again, it's a brand new event, and at the end of both the East and the West event, we'll have a publication which will be serve as a sort of annual update of what is happening in the accessibility field regarding legal issues in the digital space. Again, taking that information from the experts and putting it in a format that we can then share much more widely. Okay, so that's the slide 14, slide 23, sorry, is the contacts and the URLs. I can be contacted. My website is accessibilitytrack.com. The Accessibility Switchboard is quite easy. It's www.accessibilityswitchboard.org. The Testing Symposium is that's coming up in November in Arlington, Virginia. It's www.ict2018.org, and the new event, the Digital Accessibility Legal Summit, is www.accessibility.legal. I know in this short webinar we haven't had time to work in a lot of questions and answers, or any really. So do contact me directly. My contact details are up on the website. If you've got questions about the Switchboard, the Testing Symposium, the Legal Summit, or any other issue to do with implementation of accessibility across an organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris, for sharing your work with us today. I'd encourage everyone to go to the website. It's really a great resource. Session evaluations will be sent out to everyone who has participated today. Let us know what you think of today's webinar and what you might like to hear about in the future. On slide 24, you'll find our contact information for the Mid-Atlantic ADA Center. For questions about the ADA, you can call us toll-free at 800-949-4232, and locally at 301-217-0124. Visit us online at adainfo.org, or you can send us an email at adainfo@transcen.org. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and have a great day.
Thank you very much. Cheers.